Hi, good morning, good evening, wherever you're watching from. I'm Sean from PlanFirst Pinnacle Design. We are a architectural, interior and landscaping company based in Auckland, New Zealand. Today we're going to finish off on our last talk where we've been discussing whether a typical floor plan can be placed on different site typologies. So we've had a look at, we started with urban sites, then we moved along to mountain or sloping sites. We looked at beach sites, and we also had a look at rural sites or lifestyle estates. So we had a look at the pros and cons, challenges, opportunities. And today our last talk in the series is a flat suburban site. So I think this is most probably where the majority of people would feel comfortable. Most of us live in suburban properties, which are basically properties which are located within a city's perimeters. So you can look at it like a standard residential lot. They're not always level. But if you are lucky or unlucky enough to have a level property, there are a lot of opportunities that we'll have a look at. But typically they've got a front yard, they've got a backyard, they've got neighbours on both sides, and they've got quite a strong presence facing the street. Driveway access is always from the street. So again, whether you northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, you would position your garage either at the, if I can say, the sun orientation side of your property or not. If you do have a choice, always choose a site that is on the opposite side of where the sun comes from. So if you're in the southern hemisphere, sun comes from the northern side, try and pick a site that's got southern access, and vice versa in the northern hemisphere. Typical with these sites as well is because they are within the city limits, they do have services readily available, and you have your surrounding neighborhood, and your each neighborhood's got its own look and feel and typology. So you would typically try and sort of keep within the look and feel of the neighborhood that you are in. So often flat sites can seem easier, and to a large extent they are. The construction access is easier. Everything can be on one level. If you choose to build a single story, you have less excavation. Straightforward foundations depending on your soil. You might have a raft foundation if necessary, but generally quite an easy site to design on. The biggest opportunities is that you can create practical, comfortable family living. So you can have a good indoor-outdoor flow. You don't have to have a lot of stairs between your indoors and your outdoors because it is a flat site. You can connect very well to your garden spaces, and keeping in mind, always design your outdoors at the same time that you design your indoors. So just going back to our 250 square meter typical house that we're looking at in the series, don't just take that house plan. Look, you would most probably have to change bits and pieces of it, but don't just take it and put it on the site. Have a look very carefully how it relates to your indoor-outdoor space, and design that outdoor space at the same time when you are having a look at your master plan site layout. It also gives you the opportunity to provide a very private backyard. Sometimes when we have coastal sites or when we have sloping sites, you have to look very carefully at privacy, but unless your neighbor has a double-story house looking down onto you, it is quite easy to create the private space outdoors. Works very well for children and pets. You don't have tripping hazards and things like that. Dogs and cats can move indoors and outdoors as they wish. And nice for family routines as well, because your outdoors are right next to your indoors. Somebody can be cooking in the kitchen, another person can be sitting outside, kids can be playing on the lawn. It creates a very comfortable family living environment. Site layout does still matter, however. So as with any site, you would start with your orientation. With some of the other typologies, we looked at your secondary question to ask yourself is, where are the views? So we don't have that in this instance because we're working with flat sites, but you want to have a look, where's your best sunlight coming from? Where are your neighbours' houses positioned in relation to your site? That'll, to a degree, determine where on that site you're going to place your house. And also, if you do have neighbours looking directly onto you, you might want to remove some windows from the specific side that is affected. It'll determine where your outdoor living goes. It'll determine where your driveway goes. Now, obviously, the driveway will go on the street side. And I say obviously, but it's actually not that obvious, because in years gone by, and you see it quite a lot with older neighborhoods, people used to always hide their garages at the back of their property. So quite often you'd have the house and then you'd have the driveway driving past the house to the back, and that is where the garages would be. Because the family living was a lot more orientated towards the street. So that has changed somewhat over the years. So, I mean, typically now the driveway would be facing the street, your garage would be on the street side. And then just carefully looking at that privacy in your backyard. And also important is your link with your driveway to your street. You wouldn't want to make the driveway or garage access too big. You know, if we have a look at this image, if you did have two double garages on either side with an entrance door in the middle, it would not be as comfortable as what it is now. Try and promote some visual eyes on the street when you're inside the house, but keeping privacy in mind at the same time. Your sun and orientation, always, always extremely important, regardless of what site you're looking at. You want to have a look at morning sun and afternoon sun. In summer, you want to make sure you've got enough shading, and in winter, you want to make sure that you've got enough sunlight coming into the house, not only to warm it up, but also to just bring the light in, so that you don't have, you want to avoid dark central spaces in your house. So make sure there's enough natural light coming in and they are orientated in the right direction. Privacy from neighbors. If you do have neighbors looking onto you, screen it either with screens or with vegetation. I like to screen with vegetation. It just brings a lot more green into your space. Bedroom and bathroom privacy, take extra caution with that, even if you have to use frosted glass. I remember right in the beginning of the series when we started doing these live talks, when Nick Lico was still chatting with me about one of the, I think it was an apartment building in Wellington, and he was mentioning that they had the windows right on the corridor. So just frost them so that you don't have any issue with privacy. And of course, if you are putting screens in, those screens can be opened or closed as you wish. So one of the biggest challenges with a suburban site is balancing all these factors that we speak about. So you want to balance your privacy. You want to also actually balance the amount of house versus the amount of site that you have. It can be quite tempting to actually want to just build the complete site closed, but that is probably the worst thing that you can do. And I will explain how I approach design if I'm doing a new build in a suburban area. But you want to balance the privacy, the sun, your outdoor living, and your street presence as well. So all those factors are very important. Planning controls. So that is where I always start, and I think most designers would be the same. You get given a specific property, and you get your client brief, and then you are in a position that you can start having a look at your parameters for your design. Now, the first thing that I always do is you would go to your planning rules. So you would find out what the parameters are for that site. What is your height restriction? What are your setbacks on the property? What are your recession plans? Also, where are your services? That is important. So have a look at all the legal requirements for the site. You know, you would have to look at what your coverage is that you are allowed, you know, single story versus double story. All those factors are very important before you start planning, because if you just fly into it, as most of us love to do, without having those parameters, the chances are very good you're going to have to redesign. Yes, and you don't want too much house on the site either. So connecting again your indoor outdoor spaces, it gives you a great opportunity on suburban sites as well to have an outdoor kitchen, which can be located quite close to your kitchen, but it just allows for, depending on what country you're in, a lot of us enjoy living outside, but you can make it very suitable for everyday life. So just make sure that your outdoor areas aren't so deep that they're going to take away sunlight from the inside space. If you do have a very deep patio, just make sure then you have some alternative lighting coming into your living areas. Street frontage. Importantly, your front door needs to be the hero of your street facade. I have had instances where I go quite often when I've got clients that want to do renovations, and I get to the house and I actually don't know where the front door is, because it just is not clear sometimes. And this also comes from years gone by. Front doors used to be at the side of the house. So you've really got to search for it. Try and avoid that. Try and have the front door as visible as possible. And you can even do that, as we have in this image here, is with your landscaping and just a clear demarcated path leading to the front door. Your eye immediately gets drawn to that, and you know that that is the flow in you know, you need to follow that flow to get to the front door. Also, just be careful with street facades. You want to have a pedestrian walkway, not just a driveway, because you don't want the pedestrians to have to always, there could be vehicles parked in the driveway, and then the pedestrians and the vehicles have to compete for the same space. So have a separate pedestrian access. Landscaping, it can make or break a facade of a house. Make it friendly and inviting and welcoming. That is really what you're trying to do. And again, just balance your indoor outdoor privacy. You want to have eyes on the streets when you are inside the house. Something that's interesting is, you know, coming from South Africa, it's very seldom that you would see a house like this unless it is in an estate, because we generally have got very high walls in front of our properties. Most countries in the world, like New Zealand, they wouldn't have the high walls in the front. So it really does give them an opportunity to showcase the house, make it as inviting and friendly as possible. And then again, just carefully look at how you use your front yard. What I always recommend, and what I try and do with designs that I do for clients as well, just have enough space in front of your garage to park one vehicle. So at least 5 meters, ideally 5.5 meters. And that really is enough So it's enough to give you additional parking and also to give you an opportunity to put some landscaping in the front, but it also doesn't take away too much from your living space at the back. You want that to be actually as large as possible. So keeping the front to a minimum 5.5 meters, I would suggest. And then just make sure you've got a bit of street appeal. So nice lighting. We did do a whole talk about curb appeal of houses previously. So if that is something you're interested in, you will find it on the channel. It was one of the earlier talks that we did. And then the question that most people ask, do they go single story or do they go double story? So both have got pros and cons. A single story is great for accessibility and great for family living as well. Or if you are, scaling down and you've got the space and you don't want the stairs, you would go single story. The pros on the double story is that you reduce the size of your footprint, which means that you've got a bigger opportunity for outdoor living in the backyard. So it just depends on how big is your site, how big are you planning to build. Building a double story does give you a very nice opportunity to separate the public spaces from the private spaces, because you can put all your bedrooms upstairs. Generally, one tries to put one bedroom at least downstairs. It just adds flexibility to the house. And it also, a double story does give you more opportunity for northern light. If everything is on a single story, you are competing a little bit for that northern or southern light wherever you are based. And it does also allow for more privacy if you have got your bedrooms upstairs. So again, just depending exactly on how you live and what exactly it is that you want. Then your planning rules, which I've mentioned previously to look at. First and foremost, before you do anything, look at your planning rules and your site coverage. Your boundary setbacks, very important. Height limits. There are quite often outdoor space requirements and parking requirements as well. So that is important. Something that a lot of people don't always realize is on some properties, not always, but on some properties you would have public services like stormwater or drainage, or even electrical sometimes, or water, which runs underneath the property. So it could be that this property was an infill property which already had services which were put in previously. If you do have an instance like that, usually you would need to build, sometimes it's 2 meters or 3 meters away from those services, but that is a discussion. That would be a parameter that you would have to design around. So make sure you just research all that information before you start. The aesthetic of the house and the layout of the house is one thing, but it's meaningless if you can't actually build it on site because of all your other parameters. I had an instance actually a couple of weeks ago where a client called me, and she had a very big piece of ground. It was a couple of hectares. And she was very excited because she wanted to build a second house on that piece of land. And I went to see her and I got her brief and we chatted about exactly what it was that she wanted. She wanted a 600 square meter house, which is a big house, but it's on a couple of hectares. It's very easy to do that. So the first thing I did before I even went ahead with the project is I got all the site information and I called the council. Her site was quite a long, narrow site, and I think it was 35 meters wide, which by any standards is very wide. But it turned out that the setback, because it was in a rural area, the setback from the boundaries was 20 meters. So if you've got 35 meters and you've got a setback 20 meters from that boundary and 20 meters from that boundary, she actually couldn't build anything on it. So, you know, don't let looks be deceiving. Do your research properly and speak to the planning department at the council if you are unsure. You'd also want to, not always, but you sort of try and keep with the theme of the neighborhood. You know, obviously, if you want to build a modern house, you would do that, but you wouldn't necessarily go really radically different from what the neighborhood is. So have a look at the character. Then your existing trees and landscaping. I try always to keep as much of the landscaping as possible. So try and design around, if you do have a really nice tree on the site, try and plan around that if possible. It does help with privacy. It helps with shade in the summer. It also does add to street appeal if you're looking at the entrance of the house. You can utilize it as part of your outdoor rooms if the trees are in the backyard. It does soften the house to a large extent, and also you can use it to frame views. So if you do have a beautiful tree in your backyard, you can always frame it with a huge fixed pane window, making that tree the hero of that room. Important as well, not as important as with some of the other sites we've looked at. Wind is always a factor. So just make sure you're sheltering from wind. Again, the courtyards, if you can build a courtyard, I always recommend it. And then just define your gardens. Design the gardens. Get a landscape designer to design that garden for you. It's tempting to just plant lawn because a lot of people blow their budget on the actual house, but leave some room in the budget for your landscaping. And then services and practical planning. Sometimes this gets left as an afterthought, which is, I believe, a mistake. These things should all be planned into the design. Things like wash lines. You know, this wasn't planned properly, so the wash line has just been put above the actual flower bed, which is ridiculous. But nevertheless, have a look where your power is, your services, your water. Have a look where your wastewater connection is. Things like heat pumps and garden storage, dustbins. You know, all those things that we don't want to think about. They're not the fun part of design, but they are as important as the aesthetic of the house, if not more important. Because if we don't plan for it, then the dustbins just stand in view. You know, so to design a little space for them, it doesn't have to be a big space. So can the 250 square meter plan work here on a suburban site? Yes, as we always say, it can, but just check again the things we always check. Your checklist before you start any design would be your orientation, your planning rules, where your outdoor space is, privacy from neighbours, garage entry, where does your street run in relation to the site. So just go through your checklist. You might need to change a couple of things. In broad principle, most probably you can keep most of the layout. You might have to tweak here and there, and you might have to change a few windows, especially when it comes to orientation and privacy. Of course, garage location is also very important. But just looking at a couple of successful strategies for suburban design. Orientation first and foremost. You want a clear street entry. I have also seen instances where the designer never went to the site. They got the site information from the client, they got the brief, they designed this most fantastic, beautiful house. And when they got to site to actually build, in some instances, I think council did approve it in that specific house that I'm thinking of. And there was a street light in the middle of the driveway. So, of course, they had to redesign after the fact. So just make sure you have all your services and all your information up front. And then just balance, especially on the street side, balance your garage with the rest of your house. Front door, very important. And then a little bit of outlook space as well. Storage is actually something that a lot of designers and homeowners leave as an afterthought. Try and design storage into the house. Very easily done if you do it at the same time. A lot of the designing that I'm doing nowadays are actually homeowners wanting more storage. So if you do it from the start, you don't have to worry about that later. So what makes a good suburban flat site home? All the things that we've spoken about previously, and also make sure that you're using your site effectively. Pull it as close as possible to the street. If you know that you're going to be building a home office in 2, 3, 5 years' time, have it as part of your master plan, because if you at the back of your mind you're going to do it, but you just choose to turn a blind eye and you ignore it in the beginning, then what happens is you're not going to have space for it if you are putting the house 5 or 5.5 meters from the street boundary. So just keep those things in mind as well if you know that you will be doing something in the future. Let's have a look. Yes, just make sure it's nice and spacious. Have enough room on the sides. This is also something that's important. Another instance that I've got at the moment is client's house is built basically 1 meter from one boundary and 1 meter from the other boundary. They have got a retaining wall on the opposite side, which is failing, and the only access to that retaining wall is from the street. So they actually need to demolish their garage to get the machinery in to sort out the retaining wall. So try, if at all possible, just keep a bit of a clearance on one side. By all means, put it 1 meter if those are your rules and regulations. Put it 1 meter to one side, but have a little bit more space on the other side. Try not to go from boundary to boundary. So that is quite important as well. So yes, absolutely the same plan. Could work, tweak a little bit here and there, like we've said in this whole series. In most instances, unless you are on a very tight urban site, most house plans can work on most sites with a bit of tweaking. Final takeaway, just sunny, private, practical. Practical is important. We don't speak about that often enough. Have a look at that existing 250 square meter plan that you do have with a fresh set of eyes. Make sure it is practical and the flow works well. Have well-connected indoor and outdoor living. Use your land efficiently. Make sure, I've also seen in instances where clients will just place the house in the middle of the site, not really thinking that they can actually pull it towards the street to give them more living space at the back. So a lot of the front space is actually wasted if you do that. Then our next topic, which I'm extremely excited about, is selling your house. A lot of people have this question, and I get asked this question a lot. I'm selling my house. What can I do to make it more attractive to buyers? So that is something we're going to have a look at. I think I might do a bit of a mini series on that, because it's too much to discuss in one sitting. So we'll have a look at external factors, internal factors. A lot of people don't want to spend too much money if they know they're going to sell their house, but they do want to maximize whatever they do to get the best return on their investment. So that will be our topic for next week. It will be the part 1 of the next mini-series. Thank you all for watching. And if you are interested in any of the other topics that we have spoken about, you can have a look on the channel. We have got quite a few videos, but all the other site typologies are there as well. And once again, you're more than welcome to contact me if you need any advice or help on anything. And I look forward to seeing all of you again next week. Thank you.